the point is that Zizek is right? There is a sense in which there is something to me that is known, but I don't know that I know. And the Orneric rebus is probably as close as you can get to that unknown known, right? It's I don't know that I do know. And what is it that I don't know that I do know? I don't know now, while I'm awake and my mind is operational in sort of this academic setting, that the point of me doing all of these videos and all of this work is to try and, do some other thing in the world or make amends of some other thing. But when I go to a dream state, when I go through transposition, through Entstellung, that other thing becomes operational, right? And not only does it become operational, right, I know that it's operational in the dream state, and it's represented by some symbol. And really and truly, for me to make sense of it, I need to, wait for my dream and identify the reoccurrence of that thing or the function of that thing in my dream state, because it is sort of elevated to the level of meaning. So, Entstellung facilitates the transposition of the object relation, right? And what he means by the object relation is that my relationship to the object bird in the real world is different from my relationship to the object aleph in the dream state, right? It becomes a representation of that sort of tacit awareness, right? I am tacitly aware of hegemonic power. I'm tacitly aware of patriarchy. I'm tacitly aware of intellectual acumen, if you will. I'm tacitly aware of these things. I'm very aware of the red light, right? I'm very aware of my speech and my sound and my being and my embodiment, right? So that takes precedence in cognitive awareness. But there is a sense in which there is an awareness, and this is where the whole unconscious comes in. There is a sense in which I can know that I don't know, right? So I don't know that I do know, right? I don't know that I do know, and I'm still very, very fascinated by this. So at the top of the last page, page 16, beginning of 3.2, we see that it is within the community that this is going to have meaning, and within the community, it might be the case that we've been making this error, right? We've been saying that when I see aleph and when I see vowel, what's being signified is bird, right? And Lacan says that that's categorically wrong, right? That's not what's happening. But the linguistic community has within itself, and this is very important, within itself assumed an improper signification signal representation, so that the community is almost perpetually engaged in an incorrect discourse. And this has political ramifications. I don't want to get to that level because, I mean, that's Zizek's level. But just to sort of approximate it, it's the case that we are having a discourse on sign, on meaning, so that you can say an axis of evil, right? And I'm not knocking anybody, but when you say an axis of evil on a political level, what's being done is I'm representing the objective fact, my relationship to objects, my relationship to people, as emblematic of this signification evil, right? So that I'm ascribing meaning to this group as evil, right? This has sort of primordial power, right? This has primordial power. This is why the best storytellers, why George Lucas, why Joseph Campbell, why Tolkien, why Rawlings, why they are masters of their trade, because they fully understand, not that they can just write well, but they fully understand the appropriation and the ascription of meaning to otherwise mundane facts of the matter, right? It's that which is governing us. And according to Lacan, it's doing it without our awareness, right? The whole thing is that we're being directed without even knowing that we're being directed, right? With respect to the individual is defined by the constructs of our unconscious mind, and this is the final symbolization, right? What happens is we see that the aleph at this point has been elevated to the point of the signifier. It now has the meaning and giving activity. So I've labeled it as signifier. But not only is it the signifier, it is the oneric rebus. And I've just selected aleph because I thought it was a cool picture. But it is now that which needs to be interpreted. So the question becomes, what is signified? What is the meaning of this? I can't answer that question, what is signified, while I'm asleep. I have to awake. And this is why I go to talk to the shrink, right? I tell the shrink, here's what I'm dreaming about, and the shrink helps me. The shrink can't tell me, but the shrink helps me identify the connection, the meaning to this image, right? And it's this, as I said, this tacit awareness, right? It's a mode of, to be technical, it's a mode of existing within the world that isn't immediately cognizable. Right? It isn't immediately cognizable for whatever biological reasons it's not. I don't immediately recognize that I do know that there's some power differential between the husband and wife in the way that they sit, between the father and the kids in the way that they talk. But I see it, but I don't see it, right? And it isn't until I've gone through transposition and Stellung that it bubbles to the surface. And then what I attempt to do is reconstitute my understanding of the real world by injecting that meaning from the dream world into the real world, right? So it is, and I'll draw that image in a second. It is the role then of the psychoanalysis to gain access to the oneric rebus through the dialogue, right? Tell me about your dream. I keep having this dream of an aleph. Well, why? Blah, blah, blah. I tell them, da-da-da. Oh, wow. You know, it's probably because you're scared of death. Have you ever thought of that? What's going on? Da-da-da, da-da-da. And this is how it goes through, right? What the psychologist is trained in is allowing us to disclose to them what it is that's bubbling to the surface when my cognitive abilities are sort of laxed, right? And what's bubbling to the surface when I'm lax is whatever it is that I'm dreaming about. It could be death, right? It could be, you know, impoverishment. It could be corruption. That's the stuff that sort of, when I'm not thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. My day-to-day thoughts are a suppression of that, but I can't suppress it after I've gone through transposition, this disfigurement. And once this disfigurement is taking place, then literally the aleph turns into this sort of, this phoenix, if you will, right? It becomes both death and life. It becomes both the vow and the aleph, right? It's the one being that is both a representation of death and birth, which is sort of the conflation of vow with aleph, really, to be technical. So, in the Saussurian algorithm, S and S of the Saussurian algorithm are not the same place, right? They're not in the same place. Man was deluding himself, and this is a quote, in believing that he was situated in their common axis, which is nowhere, right? And the question becomes, what does not in the same place mean? What does he mean by this? And here's the last thing that I want to end with. This statement precedes Lacan's discourse of the cogito and the structures of metonymy and metaphor. The plane that he's talking about is an epistemological gulf which arises as a consequence of the transposition of the signifier. And what does that mean? It basically means this. And this is the last thing, and then I'll conclude my discussion. What it means is that we have two planes. And everyone thought there was one plane before. You have the plane, you have a plane when you're awake, and you have a plane when you're asleep. The plane that you're asleep is contingent on transposition. And through the process of transposition, the signifier is elevated. Within the awake world, my signifier is suppressed. Right? Tree. This points to the concept tree. In the dream state, tree now points to something in the real world. So this is back and forth, right? Tree in the dream state, in the awake state, points to this notion, this concept of tree. But in the dream state, it points to something else. We'll just say knowledge. How do we know this connection, right, is the next question. How do we recognize, how do we come to know that there's a connection between this and this, because it's not immediately apparent? The way that we recognize this connection is by looking at the connection of signifiers, right? So that my signifier tree seems to always be connected to, let's say, understanding. And it's through this connection between signifiers that I arrive at meaning. This meaning is the signification. But the first thing that we have to recognize is that within this state, unlike this state, and the example that he gives is one of Aleph, is that the signifier can and does often function without it representing what it's depicting. The picture of a bird, the bird vulture, has nothing to do with birds. It has to do with sort of to be, right? The verb to be, the form of the verb to be. If I remember the reading correctly, vow has nothing to do with a bird. I think it also has something to do with a form of the verb to be, right? What we recognize, since that is the case in an awakened state, there has to be a case where we can say that this image doesn't represent what you think it would. It represents something different, right? And it can be very complex. Here's where the problem arises, because what the linguistic community has been doing, what the linguistic community has been doing is that the linguistic community has been improperly placing emphasis on the signification, right, on the meaning, without recognizing that you can't, according to Lacan, arrive at this meaning without a holistic understanding of the chains, the interrelations and interlinks of signifiers. It's only through an understanding of the interrelation of signifiers that we come to have a greater understanding of meaning. And the implications that I gave you had to do with, like, for example, power differentials, power, that's what I'm interested in, imbalances in power. I don't recognize this apparently in the daytime. However, at nighttime, when I'm sleeping and I'm sort of cognitively lax, it comes to the forefront. So my dream about a car, as I said before, and brake lights might be really a representation of the power imbalance I felt while I was driving. This guy is exerting his power by speeding up in front of me and then slamming on the brakes. I just noticed that, and I sort of, while I'm awake, just respond so that I don't crash. But in the dream, really what happens is that you are sort of coming in front of me in order to brake and enforce your power on limiting me or something like. You can take it really, really deep, right? I would never be able to come to that realization, not only of the dream state, but of what really happened today in my lived experience, unless I sort of reflectively look back on the events of my day and see beyond what I saw. So there's tons more that can be said, but this is as deep as I'm going to take it. I would say watch everything that Zizek's ever done, because he only sort of operates on this level, and I don't think anybody does it better than him. So, you know, if you're interested for more, sort of YouTube Zizek's video and just watch anything that he said, because I mean, this is all he talks about. With that, this is the conclusion of the series for Semiology. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch your video. I had a great time shooting the video. I had a great time lecturing. It was probably one of my favorite videos so far. Kant being a second, and I will finish my Kant lecture. So with that, thanks a lot. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Have a good day.